before you get going. For those who don't know me, you might have seen emails from myself and Hayden. My name is Christy Diagnis. I'm from DIT, New York. I'm the Vice Consul Financial Services. Hayden and myself are working on this trade mission set up to bring to you guys, or you guys to come to us in 2 weeks. So we're really excited to have you. And we're really, really excited to have Bill Kenney today, founder of Meet ROI, to speak to us about making sure that we get everything out of this trade mission that we possibly can. So if you guys have any questions more broadly about the trade mission, please feel free to reach out to myself or Hayden. You've all either spoken to us or seen emails from us. We're happy to address any concerns you have. And with that, I will turn it over to Bill. And thank you, Bill, so much for taking out the time to speak with our companies.
Oh, totally my pleasure, and thank you for your generosity in setting this up as well. Yeah, the webinars are wonderful. The one thing you lose with webinars is nonverbals. It's hard for me to get nodding heads or anything like that. Certainly I would just suggest any questions you have as we're going through this, please stop me. Anything like that. And I'm going to endeavor to kind of move fairly quickly so that we have time at the end to really answer questions as well. But certainly invite your questions as we're going. So I'm going to see here if I can share my screen. Why am I not seeing? Let's just see. Why am I not seeing machine screen sharing option? Oh, there it is. Gosh darn it. That's impressive. All right. So in a moment, you should see my screen. Okay. So I'm just going to hop into this, and please, again, stop with any questions as we go. You're going to be going to New York City. There's going to be tons of opportunity, and the real point of this, and as I was talking to Christy and emailing with Hayden as well, is we've been on several trade missions, and I've always come home, certainly nourished and excited, but also with the sense that, if I had only known this or done that, we would have gotten more out of it. And that's really the genesis of doing these workshops is, really the goal is to help you kind of anticipate some of the things that will help you create very good value from going and participating in this trade mission. Obviously, the goal, let's have fun, let's do all that stuff, but ultimately, when you get home, let's really have some very strong, tangible results. And they're going to vary by organization. So hopefully you can see my slides. This slide, it's sort of depicting that, childhood game of spinning plates. And when you go on trade missions, and I'm realizing it now, I've been in Europe for 3 weeks. I've got another 10 days to go. And every time it's sort of the same experience. And I end up working 2 business days for every day. I work sort of the European day, and then everybody at home wakes up, and I work that day too. And we have clients in Australia and other difficult time zones. So I think it's one of those things you have to be prepared for. An amplification of kind of what you're going to be asked to do, not just being active and present in the trade mission, but also we all are busy beyond that. And so making sure that you're prepared for that or can delegate as much as possible while you're traveling. Our agenda is real simple. We're going to talk about the components. We'll talk about the components of the trade mission, specifically your goals. We'll talk about activities before, during, and after, and then some, hopefully some valuable tips. So one of the things with trade missions is that, and when I look at the work that our friends at DIT have done to put together a really exciting agenda, what it ends up being is that their role is a lot like setting up a gym. And so, they've put the equipment in place, they put the juice bar in place, the showers and the cleaning area in place, and all those accoutrements. but there's another role in this, and that's sort of the personal trainer or somebody to help you build the plan. And that's really what we're going to work on today is how do we help you sort of leverage the assets specifically to help you accomplish your goals. And everybody should ultimately have a somewhat different plan, because we all have different goals, and different sets of the assets make sense for us to use. Not everybody uses all the equipment in the gym. So we want to make sure that you're tuned to what's available. So when we look at the agenda, you're going to see various components. You'll see content. You'll see a reception by the New York Tech Alliance, the RegTech Summit, networking. There's a pitch event, and then there's site visits. And so the agenda has all of these components, starting with Tuesday evening with a nice fireside chat with the expats, and then kind of proceeding through with the various content elements and networking receptions, pitch events, site visits, and so on. And so again, as you're sort of considering this, these are like bits of equipment in the gym, and there are other things that are self-service, right? You can, while you're in New York or in the US, create appointments outside of the trade delegation as well. And so how do you manage that, and which of these are the highest value for you? Ultimately that's going to be very individual, and sort of figuring out your agenda within the agenda, or even outside of the agenda. So making sure you've got that squared away. And so when we think about the process, and it's usually in a lot of this stuff easiest to start with the outcome we're looking for. And so I would suggest a couple of things. And that gym metaphor where, okay, we're now working on that sort of personal training, and defining which equipment and what goals we're serving. And as we look at goals, I think the thing to sort of maybe two comments about an hourglass is, these trade missions are very short, and being able to leverage the time that we're there is important. The sand will certainly leak out of the hourglass. The other thing to consider, which is generally not talked about a lot in market entry, and that does create a lot more urgency, is that we talk about whether it's customer acquisition or revenue generation or fundraising and so on as being sort of key quite often to market entry, but actually time is probably the most valuable of all components. And when you think about it, your team, your investors, your customers, your employees are only going to be excited and passionate for a finite amount of time. If you don't begin having some wins or some sales traction, whether it's within 6 months or 12 months or 24 months, some of those committed components will seek excitement or reward somewhere else if they're not getting it. And so when you go on a trade mission, thinking about how you're going to attack a new market, there should be some component of time management, and how you're going to build a sort of a platform that drives successes as quickly and as early on as possible, so that again you continue to build commitment as opposed to having to manage and really it's almost sort of, if you will, pay for commitment. It's much better if people are leaning in than you having to pull them in, and that's certainly what we want to have happen. So certainly we want to be ready when we look to enter a new market. And the U.S. market, as you'll see, is large, and it's complex regionally, and so making sure that you're making decisions about where to go. There will be a variety of factors that you'll weigh. Hopefully one of the bigger ones will be where are the customers. That certainly helps, but there are certainly other things you'll want to consider in that. So let's get down to maybe more specifics about the trade mission and thinking about your particular goals. So I would suggest, think of, and I'll just put some lines on the screen here, think of your priorities around market entry and maybe things that you want to make sure get accomplished in the next, say 6 months. And it may be a different time frame, but what are the key things that you want to accomplish when you visit New York or when you visit the US, and where do they fit within the spectrum of priorities relative to market entry? And so, you're going to have a variety of things here. Some it'll be early customers, and actually I read your profiles last night. I did see, customer acquisition. I saw fundraising. I saw partner identification or acquisition. So you guys are obviously thinking through that, but make sure that you're delineating, which one's top, and then thinking about what assets serve those outcomes. And so, where are you going to be able to, for example, meet customers? Where in the agenda? Are there some specific things that you should come prepared for with that in mind? And we'll talk about your own sort of assets you'll come with in just a little bit. But think about, which of the agenda items align with the priorities you have, and what else could be added while you're in town that you can manage. Again, whether it's additional meetings, additional opportunities, those types of things that you can add into your schedule, your regimen. And then think about what you're going to do to measure outcomes. And so what are of the 3 or 2 or even 1 top priorities, what makes it successful? So, and I'll give you some examples. Probably most of you have heard of SMART goals: really simple, specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound. So we want to use things like these. So we want to select a location by a certain date, 25th of November, or we want to acquire 3 prospective customers while we're in the US, or we want to secure 2 investor meetings, or ID channel partner, or a channel partner, or identify 2 potential strategic partners. And it may, obviously you'll have different goals, you should, but making sure that they're not only have a date, but also a quantity attached to them, so that it's really, you know when you're successful, when it's worked well, and that really does guide your effort. It helps you, when you think about like going into a room to network, if you have a specific objective, not only are you focused on that and focused on meeting the people that will help you with that, but you're actually able to articulate that objective. And really, a lot of the leverage in networking is, it's not really networking if it's binary. In other words, you just talking to one person. It's really about you empowering that person to identify opportunities in their network, and it may be somebody else who's across the room that they can introduce you to. So it's a lot of this is not it's in part being able to guide your own activity, but in part it's being able to inform others that leverage the greater network to be able to help you make the appropriate connection. So the more you can articulate it and the more people you articulate it to, then it will help you. And the more you can seed the ground ahead of the event, the more likely you are to make the appropriate connections while you're in town. And meetings can happen anytime. You can have pre-event meetings where you're on Zoom or Skype or whatever before you get to town. Certainly while you're in New York, you can have all sorts of meetings. And then certainly there are going to be people you didn't have time to meet while you were there that it's a perfect excuse to have a post-event meeting. But ultimately using the visit as sort of a rallying point to create additional meetings. So again, you're looking to make connections using the available resources. And so the resources, and actually it's interesting when we look at how people use their networks, they often think of, gosh, who's in our industry that we can leverage, or who's a potential partner. The least used and probably the most effective are going to be your hosts. Certainly the folks at DIT and the British Consulate, if they know who you're looking to connect to, and you support their knowledge and really help give them good sort of framework in terms of who's good for you to meet, their ability to make connections for you is better probably than most any other resource, because they've been on the ground, inserted in the market for years, and already have some really good pre-existing relationships. And my first business was a networking organization, and the least frequent question I got asked was for help in terms of connecting to people, which was the most amazing thing to me, because by virtue of what I was doing, not that I knew everybody, but I had a massive, massive network. And so again, your hosts are often the best source, and as a very minimum, they're a degree away from people that can get you to the right people. So, it's really using the leverage of people that are hubs, or organizations that are hubs. The economic development organizations that are in the US or in New York, certainly I'm sure there'll be some involved in your programming, but leveraging the local ecosystem as well. When you go to the RegTech Summit, talking to the exhibitors, they're certainly good, and any of the speakers are always good. And then investors, they're invested in the market and would certainly have insights that would be really valuable for you. But utilizing, any of the resources, any of the connections you come through. But again, part of it is your ability to make connections with people, but it's also your ability to articulate clearly who you're hoping to meet. That information helps empower the network. It helps people, and the more specific you are, the more it helps empower people to make much better connections and very quickly look sort of in their directory to be able to, easily connect you with the right person. If you're general and broad, what you'll find is you'll get many less connections than if you're specific and narrow and concise. So the more you can do that, the better. So, and again, I apologize, I'm going to kind of run through this a bit so that we get to dialogue, because that's really, truly where hopefully this is the most effective. But let me give you sort of a picture of activities pre-departure, during the delegation, and then post. So when you think about pre-departure, this is, again, you're sort of setting the stage or setting the table for really good success while you're in town. So clearly you want to have very specific goals. Who do you want to meet is key, and what outcomes do you want? And there are, if you're fundraising, what dollar amount, when does the round close, all that kind of stuff. If it's customers, what does a good customer look like? What's that ideal customer persona? And maybe it's a hypothesis now. That's okay. Again, the more specific you can be about what that buyer persona looks like, the easier it's going to be for people to introduce you to that. Even if that you might have 2 buyer personas or 3 buyer personas, but the more fleshed out it is and clear, the easier it is for people to make those introductions. And again, be specific, real key. So what are the preparation elements we want to do here? Some of you are going individually, some of you are going with multiple team members. The more you can engage your team in the preparation, the better. And so one of the things, it's funny, I know some of you, if not all, are going to be pitching, formally, all of us will be pitching, we all pitch every day. But one of the things that is so interesting I just came from an event with 100 companies that were pitching. And so I have a lot of experience in this. I go to a zillion events a year. But the thing that is always amazing to me is, most people envision that their pitch begins sort of when they get on stage or they take the microphone. And your pitch actually begins when you enter the room, or when the audience you're going to speak to begins getting awareness of you. And so when you think about your team and preparing your team, it's really preparing your team to perform independently is what you want to do, because you're communicating they say about 60% of our communication is nonverbal. So, that pitch is actually only a small part of our communication. What's more important is actually what the people we're interacting with and relating to experience of us. And so is our team able to work the room? Are we able to separate and people act independently? And quite often I see teams or companies of, of people walking around as a small cloud, and they, it's like this, in some cases, a rain cloud. But you want to really make sure that you're able to separate, and that every person is prepared to articulate your goals, articulate your value proposition, very clearly state who you want to meet, and to add value to the room. And by doing that, think about what, let's say, for example, an investor experiences. Do you think an investor would rather invest in a team that can operate independently and where everybody seems to be very clearly understanding of the goals and how to accomplish them, or a team that is reliant on one person to communicate while everybody else sort of looks on? And I think it's a pretty easy question to answer. So preparation also might include and should include pre-setting some meetings. The more you can do of those, the better. And if you could come a day early, stay a day late, any of that stuff, the more meetings you can get while you're in town, certainly is high leverage. Then, of course, you want to rehearse. Make sure that you're, again, able to clearly articulate the key elements of what you're looking for and what your goals are. So the assets here, certainly your pitch, being able to articulate a value proposition. So a value proposition, I find there's some confusion about what a value proposition is. It's really as simple as stating what you do for who. And if you can get it down to 10 words, 15 words, that's really kind of where you want to get to. 5 words is even better. But, so 10 words is under 10 seconds. It's like 8 or 7 seconds. So you want to make it really clear and simple. An opportunity one sheet, I find actually a lot of folks don't have one of these, but what that would be is sort of a profile of what you're looking for on one page. So as you're meeting with somebody, maybe you're at a networking event, or maybe it's after the pitch event or whatever, and they seem somehow interested, whether they're a prospective customer or an investor, or they have a network that could get you to those, is being able to just hand them a simple overview. And these opportunity one sheets, again, it's going to be different if you're looking for investment versus customers, but something that simply outlines the opportunity, gives a little information on your company, the contact points, there's basic information. And I'm happy to share with anyone some outlines that we've worked out on those. But again, that can be very good because suddenly you're giving somebody something tangible that they can either make notes on, they can take back and hand off to somebody else. Certainly have that in PDF form as well, so you can easily email it. Right from your phone is the best. Having a summary of the targets that you're looking for on that opportunity one sheet, if that's appropriate, is also a great idea. And then having a good self-introduction, which might be 20 or 30 seconds about kind of what you do. And that would generally include your value proposition. It would be sort of a bit longer version that's more sort of about you and kind of your role in delivering the value proposition usually. So yeah, we want to get in the water. A lot of success in these is to some degree getting out of your comfort zone and sort of getting in and getting wet and paddling downstream, as it were. So things to think about during the trade mission and to make sure you're accomplishing. And this is actually probably one of the hardest things, is to be present, because we've got so many priorities. But to make sure that you're as sort of buttoned up as you can be at home, so that you can put as much focus into the trade mission, is really important. If you're always on your phone or always on email, that's obviously just going to take away time from what you can get. So the more you can be ready to go, the better the results you're going to get will be. And then certainly making sure you're performing. So are you ready with your pitch? Is your team ready to divide and conquer? And one of the most powerful tools in any of this, when you're on site or beforehand are questions. Quite often we spend a lot of time talking about sort of outward communication, that whether it's the pitch or self-introduction, but probably the most powerful communication tool you have is both listening and good questions, so that you can, whether it's talking to somebody who's on the ground there from an economic development standpoint, talking to a potential customer or investor or any other kind of resource, but ultimately your your biggest role is understanding the landscape and figuring out if market entry makes sense for you, or where market entry might make sense, or when. And so you've got a real opportunity to get as much information. We're waving at the lights in here. It's getting very dark in our room, which actually is kind of oh, there we go. Lights just came back on. And then engaging. Yeah, as I said, divide and conquer. If you can get your team to break up and then sync up each day or partway through the day to kind of see what results people are getting, and have everybody have a goal. That can be really powerful if each person has certain things that they're looking to accomplish. It's very empowering, and it gives you something to, again, measure success. Know when people are getting to the results that you're looking for. And it also, if you do another trade mission in the future, it also gives you a baseline to be successful at the next one and more successful. So it is a bit of a race, as we said off the top. You want to use the time really well, and so making sure that you're set up for that. So post-trade mission, you probably all know what the most important thing in the trade mission or post-trade mission is. Certainly follow-up, and it is, it's funny, every time I hear somebody talk about this, they talk about how little follow-up is done. And I know this because I go to so many events, and it's very rare that somebody follows up with me. If I instigate the follow-up, we have great conversations, but and certainly the people I talk to, it's very rare that they get followed up with. So just following up, you separate yourself, and then obviously following up diligently. In the US, follow-up is very much expected. Immediate follow-up is even more expected and appreciated. And particularly if you have a valuable conversation, you want to make sure that that's recognized and it's a minimum thanked. The rule I operate by, and this certainly may not be your rule, and that's totally fine, but as I see it, everybody gets a follow-up note, whether or not they have relevance or not, but at least it was great to meet you. And I attach my one sheet to that, and just, hey, if you run across anybody that this is of interest to, please share it with them. It's amazing what comes from that, and quite often very unexpected things. And it really doesn't take very long. Once you have the text, it's really just a matter of copying it into the next and editing the name or editing a few facts, and off it goes to the next person. So it's something that pays and can be very efficient. Your notes. So here's something we don't see a lot, but is really important. On the plane back or on the way to the airport, just make some notes about what you learned and what you do different on the next delegation or trade mission or next market entry excursion of any kind. But again, we should, there's no perfect execution of these. We should all be learning and evolving with each one. And obviously our friends at DIT would love that kind of feedback as well, because that just helps them help the next delegation perform better and better as well. And your experiences are really important to that process. Fundamentally, this is about kicking ass. And again, entering the US, don't be bashful. Execute your post-event plan, grow your venture, build your tribe, make those connections. You won't hurt anybody's feeling by following up multiple times. And the thing that we, I think, see quite often is that people, if they follow up once, they usually give up after the second or third or fourth time. It's hard if somebody is actually relevant and you've had a good conversation with them. There are all sorts of reasons why they might not reply immediately, and you can certainly ask in an email, hey, it sounded like we had a connection, but you're not responding. Did I do something wrong, or is this Are you not looking to have an additional or a further conversation? That will usually get a response, something like that. But ultimately, I wouldn't feel bashful at all about, number one, following up immediately and following up multiple times. And I usually follow up till I hear back, or it just after the 10th time or something, it's clear that we're not good. But again, I think you assume disinterest at your own peril, and so I would assume interest until they tell you otherwise. So speed, the easiest way to think of speed is, think of the vegetables at the market. They're going to perish, and the relationships that you start, not just in the U.S., but in any delegation, are certainly perishable. And you say a lot about yourself, I think, by following up quickly. You tell them how you're going to operate. It's almost like when you're interviewing candidates. If you think of, interviewing candidates for open positions you have at your company, usually that while they're in process of being interviewed is sort of their best days. And so think of that like relationships you're building, in any sense in building your business. These should be right up there with some of the best experiences, at least out of the gate, that a client's going to have with us. And so, if we're slow, if we're unresponsive, why should they expect any better if they decide to do business with us? But they should experience something better. We need to share with them our best. So finalizing our plan, I'm just going to give kind of a couple of thoughts on this. So some of you may have heard of the example of the big rocks. For anyone that's a Stephen Covey fan, you definitely have. But the idea of this is sort of, how do you plan your time? How do you plan your day? And this metaphor not only works for trade delegations, it works for any activity, but it's really thinking about, so if you imagine, I'll just give you a 2-minute story. So imagine a teacher in front of a room full of students, and they have an clear earthen jar that's empty. And so they bring out a tray of rocks from their lectern. They've got this big earthen jar, and they say, and they start putting these big rocks into the jar. And they get the rocks all the way to the top, and they ask the class, is the jar full? And the class, of course, goes, yeah, you can't fit any more of those rocks in there. And then the teacher pulls out a tray of smaller rocks, and she starts dropping the smaller rocks in around the big rocks and fills it up to the top. And the course again asks, is the jar full? And the students kind of catch on and say, no, you have smaller rocks. And of course, the teacher then pulls out smaller rocks and pebbles. And they get down to very small pebbles. And she asks the class, is the jar full? And the students say, gosh, we don't really think you have any smaller rocks. So yeah, it's full. And of course, the teacher pulls out sand and packs the sand in around the small little rocks. And the last one is the teacher pulls out water and pours water in and just totally fills up this jar. And of course, is the jar full? It's certainly full. And the teacher asks, what was my point? And the point, of course, one student says, well, you showed us how much you can fit into a day or how much you can fit into the jar. And the teacher says, no, if I hadn't gotten the big rocks in first, they would have never fit. And I think, when you look at how do you prioritize your time, not just on trade missions, but in general, you have to identify your big rocks. What are the things that are really going to benefit your business, benefit your company, and benefit you, and prioritize those first. Make sure you fit those in first and fit everything else in around that, because you want to accomplish those big rocks. Those are the levers that will propel your business forward. So kind of 3 quick things. Obviously, we want to use this opportunity to connect. We want to use it to learn. So having the big questions that we have in mind. And then we want to use it to meet. So who else can we meet? How can we dig into new relationships, new opportunities, and all that type of stuff. So if we think about focusing on our priorities, I'm just going to share a couple of quick tips. So number one is think about your value proposition, and it's really this simple. You do what for who? That's a value proposition. So I'll give you mine really quickly. We help international growth companies soft land and scale in the US. It's 12 words. It took me probably 6 seconds to say it. We help international growth companies soft land and scale in the US. I could even narrow it down to say, we help growth companies scale. It could be that easy. And if somebody leans in and says, wow, tell me more about it, then you can expand. But the more you can give very simple descriptions, the better. We tend to tell about our technology as it's almost like we tell about, what was it Zig Ziglar said, we talk about the drill instead of creating holes. Ultimately, we want more of our communication to be about benefits, not features, so that people understand what outcomes that we deliver or that they can receive. So yeah, expanding your comfort zone, making sure that you are, sometimes modeling what you see the better performers in, whether it's networking or pitching or any of these activities that, for any of us at times are new or things that we're, not particularly experienced at, making sure you're really open to expanding your comfort zone, kind of pushing yourself out of that place where you might be used to sitting with people or any of that. The more we can break out of that, the better. Dividing and conquering, and that could be within your company. It also could be within your group, right? So you're going to go over as a delegation, but you're going to be in rooms with lots of people that aren't in your delegation, making sure you separate, making sure you create contacts. Because if you have, not just, people from your company, but also people from the delegation, if you all know each other well enough, as you meet, as you're working, for example, the RegTech Summit, you undoubtedly will run across opportunities for your peers. And if you're together, there's no leverage. But if you separate, it's very easy to create those connections as the day goes on or as the event goes on. And the same thing will happen for you. And the more you separate, the more you're kind of each working the room, the more leverage there is. So here's what I normally see when I go to these types of events is, people from the same organization all sitting together. Don't do that. Please don't do that. Take advantage of sitting next to people you don't know. Again, get out of your comfort zone. You'll be amazed at what happens when you sit next to people you don't know. And lean in, ask about what they do, learn about what they do. Why are they there? What are they hoping to gain? The law of reciprocity says they're going to be asking us similar questions. And again, you'll be amazed at the people you meet when you do that. So just a quick thought on making notes. We all get a lot of business cards. You should get a lot of business cards. So make some quick notes. Ideally, people haven't created black business cards and black on both sides. But there's some white space or light space that you can write on. So I would suggest 3 notes in 3 different categories. So what's the value of this contact, and which should be the speed at which you should follow up. So I would give them a 1, 2, or 3, 1 being hot, follow up when you get back to your hotel room that night. 3 being, follow up isn't critical, but you should at least say, thank you note. What's their relevance to you? I tend to use PCT. So are they a prospect? Are they a customer? Or are they a potential team member? That might be a partner or an employee. You might have other initials that help you, but I would just, again, my card might be a 1 and they're a P. And then ultimately, if you're an organization where, you might hand off, cards to certain people when you get back to the office or other people on the delegation, who's going to act on this? So, just putting that person's initials on so that, when you sort out the cards at the end of the day, you're able to hand off or communicate, maybe take photos of if you're passing them on to somebody else, but easy to do. But if you wait till the end of the day to do this stuff, you probably will very likely not remember. And you may make other notes like what industry they're in or this, other relevant information. But these are kind of the basic things that tell me, exactly what action I need to do when I get to my follow-up. And then, recording your lessons. Your lessons learned. is key. What results did you get, and so on again, because you want to optimize this process. It's probably very likely not the last time you'll do this kind of activity. And then thinking about this, then what are the big rocks? So number one, be really clear on who you're targeting, and why, and be able to articulate that to other people and make it really simple and clear. Leverage your time, fit in the big rocks first, and make sure those are on your schedule, and then fit everything else in around that. And then follow it fast. I mean, if you do those three things, I think you're going to get a lot out of this trade mission. Obviously, you can make it more complex and you can add more into it, but those three things would be the most valuable. So yeah, it's all about spinning the plates. We want to make sure that we leave ready to perform well, ready to get as much out of this, that we've set the table, set the ground, so that we're ready to rock and roll. So I'll leave my contact info up for just a second. I'm certainly happy to answer questions offline or directly with anybody. Somehow my WhatsApp logo ended up next to my email address instead of the phone number, but the phone number is WhatsApp, not the email address. So I will, and certainly you can get a hold of me through Christy and Hayden as well. But I'm going to stop the screen share, come back onto the screen, and certainly if you want to unmic or unmute, feel free to ask questions. I think Christy and Hayden are on as well, so it may be questions that are more about the mission itself as opposed to the tactics or strategy. Either way, but does anyone have a thought or a question?
Bill, this is Tim Sweeney. I just want to say that was really good material, really good content. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. It's very kind of you. Is there anyone else that has a thought or a question?
Hi, Bill. It's Matt at Datactics here. Sorry, I missed your C and T, your relevance. You get your P, C, and T, but I missed what the others were.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So you have prospect, client, or team member, and that might be a partner or a potential employee. So anything like that. And again, you might come up with your own initials, but that's usually the shorthand I go with.
Oh, that's really useful. Thanks. That's actually one of the things that we struggle with most is getting the notes down at the same time as talking to somebody and not looking like you're ignoring them, and then making sure that they actually are relevant to what you remember happened at the time. So that's I really like that method. That's very good. Thank you.
Yeah, and what I usually do, I was just at an event in London yesterday, the London Elite Day, and maybe some of you know of that. It's the stock exchanges event. But, and there were, I'd have conversations every couple of minutes. I was talking to a new person, and yeah, I would leave that conversation and, pull a pen out, kind of turn around and maybe walk a few steps, but make notes immediately after the conversation. Because I know with myself, if I waited till I got back to my hotel or got out to dinner and I pulled those cards out, my ability to remember that conversation would be so much less. So yeah, that can be helpful. One thing we're going to as a company, just as kind of a point of interest on business cards, as we run out of business cards, the new ones we're creating will actually have our photos on them. Not because we want people to have photos of us, but more than anything, so they remember us, when they go back to their desk, they go, oh, that was the person, attach that sort of face with the business. So cool. Anyway, just a thought. I did hear somebody else. Is there another thought or question?
Hi, Bill. This is Paul from CoinFirm. Quick question on the mission. How many people you think we're going to have in the different parts of, let's say, events? What's the expected number of people? Is it like large venues with hundreds of people, or more smaller one?
Christy, do you want to, or Hayden, do you want to come on and talk to that? So as they're figuring out the microphone, I apologize. I don't know directly, but I would guess the RegTech summit would be a fairly large. That would be hundreds of people. I'm not particularly familiar with that event, but it may even be thousands. And I'm
Yeah,
sure we can.
Hi, Bill. This is Hayden. Yeah, I
Yeah,
hit
sure.
unmute, but I didn't know you had to do *6. So I just
Oh,
figured that out.
okay. Sorry about that.
But onto the summit, I believe we're looking at around 500 plus attendees in total. So it'll be a decent size. It's not of course a huge conference like Money 2020 or Cybos or something like that, because this is a one-day event, but it's a really good opportunity, particularly for the RegTech community, because this is a much more niche event. So it's really the only people that are going to be in there are really going to be people that are relevant to the space.
Cool. Did that, and how about the other events though, when you're doing the workshops and whatnot, are there, that probably gets down to 20 or 30 people?
Yeah, so for most of the workshops on Wednesday, it'll just be a few of us from DIT, the mission delegates, and then the various service providers we have coming in. So for example, the first session in the morning after breakfast, we're doing tax session. Grant Thornton is actually doing that, and they're going to have about 3 to 4 partners in the room discussing. So generally speaking, we'll have about maximum 20 people in the room per session. And then for some of the later events, for example, the New York Tech Alliance event that evening, we're looking between 1 to 200 people. I think the cutoff is about 200 capacity-wise. So that's what we're looking at for that, and then about 100 for the pitch session on Friday.
Fantastic. Cool. Did that answer your question, Paul?
That's excellent. Thank you.
Yeah. Cool. Who else has a question or a thought?
The last question from me, Bill. Are you going to be during the event?
Oh, thank you for asking. I don't know yet. We haven't, Christy and Hayden and I haven't chatted about that, but certainly be glad to if there's something I can do to help.
That would be great to meet, Anyway, otherwise it would be good to get in touch separately.
No, please don't hesitate. I'd be glad to. I'm only about whatever 2 hours from New York. I'm not right in New York. I'm in Connecticut, which is between New York and Boston. So easy to get there for sure.
Okay.
But cool. Any other questions?
Hi, Samir here from Close Match. Is there any app that we can use to set up meetings during the event at all?
Hayden, do you want to speak to that? Is there an event app for the RegTech Summit or?
There's no app, I believe. In terms of how we're doing meetings, is we're reaching out to various firms and trying to set up those one-to-ones, generally for that Friday, which we have that time allotted after the pitch session. And then also, if those of you who are coming in beforehand, Monday, Tuesday, and then a little bit where we have time, Wednesday and Thursday. So I don't know at the RegTech Summit itself if there's going to be space. I know at the pitch session at Barclays, we have secured a few rooms at Barclays itself. So post, and I believe we have those from like 11 to 1. So after the pitch session and everything, there will be space. If there's someone that you met there and you want to go into like a breakout room and have a further conversation, a private conversation, there will be space to do that there. But yeah, unfortunately, we don't have an app to do that. That would be really cool, actually.
No problem. Is there a list that we can get of attendees for the event, so you can maybe contact them ourselves via LinkedIn, for example?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll definitely be able to give out the guest list for both the Barclays event and the Tech Alliance one. I'm not sure if we'll be able to get. I don't believe we'll be able to get the full attendees list for the RegTech Summit. You can, though, go on the website and see the list of speakers. I believe, like the director of regulatory compliance for JP Morgan's there, BNY Mellon, a lot of big names in the field. So definitely worth checking that out and reaching out to some of them. Yeah.
One last question. What's the format for the pitch sessions, the duration?
So for the first one on Wednesday at the New York Tech Alliance, that's going to be, I believe, a maximum of 3 minutes. No slides. It's really just an explanation from the founder or the representing delegate. And on Thursday, same time as today, we're having a call with Doug Benet and Andy Saldana of the New York Tech Alliance, and they'll walk you guys through how that pitch is structured, because it's a bit different from a traditional pitch to maybe clients or U.S. investors. That pitch happening at Barclays will be much more traditional. I think we're looking at 5 minutes. You can have slides if you want, however you would like to structure that, you're welcome to, and we'll also do a training beforehand on that Wednesday afternoon. So we have a US VC coming in to do that. So that's sort of how the different pitches are structured.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect. And actually, Samir, you asked the best question, which is, how do I get a list of attendees? Because that's magic, and obviously there are a variety of different events, and being able to use LinkedIn to source names is perfect. So, excellent. What other questions? Anything else that would be helpful for you all? Hayden or Christy, is there anything else that you would want to share with the group while we have everybody together?
I think we covered everything. And Bill, thank you so much for doing this. I think it was really, really useful. I guess the only thing would be just a heads up of what we have in store the next couple days. So as we said, we've begun outreach. We finished the mission brochure. So that's coming down. That's coming along. This Thursday, we're going to give you guys the event invitations so that you'll be able to start sending those out. We'll talk about guest lists and stuff. I don't think we had originally thought about maybe putting a limit on the number of guests just to keep it equitable, but I don't think we're going to do that anymore. So you guys are free to invite however many people you want to both events. But we ask that you give us the guest list beforehand so we make sure that people aren't being invited from both us and you guys and stuff like that. So be on the lookout for that on Thursday. And yeah, other than that, any questions that you have, let Christy and I know. We're happy to field those to you, and we'll have the agenda to you also later this week as well.
Cool. Well, thank you, everybody, and certainly wish you tons and tons of luck, both on the delegation, but also in your market entry. It's an incredible process, and one that I wish you tons of luck with, and certainly any questions you have or anything we can do to help, please just let us know. We're happy to help in any way. So with that, thank you all. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'm loving it here in London. So and it's great to be at DIT, and my host is Sebastian is giving me the matza sign, but we're in a beautiful conference room. So, and it has a safe, which is unusual. It's very cool. Anyway, everybody have a great day. We'll talk to you all soon.
Thank you.
All right.
Great one. Take care.
Bye now.